The surveillance camera captured her last known movements, slipping out of her bedroom window at midnight, a flash of headlights waiting in the dark. No signs of a struggle. No indication of fear. Just a 16-year-old girl climbing into a car with her two best friends. By the next morning she had vanished. And what unfolded over the following months would shock an entire nation, because the people behind her disappearance weren't strangers. They were the girls who knew her deepest secrets, and had planned her murder down to the last detail. The morning after Skylar Neese disappeared, nothing felt right. Her parents noticed her bed hadn't been slept in, and her window was open just wide enough for someone to climb out. Her cell phone was missing, but most of her belongings, including her charger and contact lenses, were still in the room. It wasn't like her. She wasn't the kind of girl to run away or vanish without a trace. At just 16 she was a model student, smart, driven, and focused. She worked part-time at Wendy's, maintained a 4.0 GPA, and was actively planning for college. But despite her accomplishments, her parents quickly sensed something was terribly wrong. The surveillance camera from the apartment complex confirmed what they feared. Just after midnight, a grainy video showed Skylar quietly slipping out of her bedroom window and running across the parking lot. A car pulled up. She got in. Then it drove off into the darkness. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. Her friends, Sheila, Eddy, and Shoaf, were questioned almost immediately. The three girls had been inseparable for years. Inseparable to the point that other classmates often felt like outsiders around them. Skylar, the only child of Mary and Dave Neese, had known Sheila since elementary school. Rachel entered the picture later in high school, and the trio became known for their strong, almost obsessive bond. But like many teenage friendships, cracks began to form. Skylar was known for being sharp-witted and outspoken. She started feeling excluded. Her tweets turned cryptic. She wrote things like, "You doing sh*t like that is why I will never completely trust you, and all I do is hope." What no one knew then was that Skylar had started to sense something darker lurking beneath the surface. Friends and co-workers recalled that she seemed increasingly anxious in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. She began avoiding Rachel and Sheila. She confided in a co-worker that she had seen something that scared her, something she couldn't unsee. But she never said what. Not to her parents. Not even to her best friends. Still, on the night of July 6, 2012, she got into that car willingly. That's what haunted people the most later. There was no force, no struggle. Just blind trust. In the beginning, the case was treated as a runaway. There was no Amber Alert issued, because police believed she had left voluntarily. Skylar's parents, however, never believed that story. They canvassed neighborhoods, distributed flyers, and posted online appeals. Meanwhile, Sheila and Rachel appeared publicly distraught, even joining the search. Sheila posted frequent tweets about how much she missed Skylar, calling her sis, and pleading for her to come home. Behind closed doors, though, their story began to crumble. Phone records, GPS data, and the inconsistencies in their statements raised red flags for investigators. They claimed they had picked Skylar up that night around 11 p.m., driven around for an hour, and then dropped her off at the end of the street so she wouldn't wake her parents. But the security footage told a different story. It showed Skylar leaving after midnight, not before. Worse, the girls claimed to have dropped her off near her home, but there was no video of the car returning. For 6 long months the case stalled. Skylar remained missing. No arrests were made. And the two girls went on living their lives, attending school, updating social media, and pretending as if nothing had happened. The pressure was mounting though, especially on Rachel. Known for being more emotional and less calculating than Sheila, she began to unravel. Friends noticed her acting erratically. She became withdrawn, prone to sudden outbursts. Then, in January 2013, she suffered a mental breakdown and was hospitalized. What followed next changed everything. While in a psychiatric facility, Rachel confessed to her lawyer and then to the police. She admitted that she and Sheila had lured Skylar out that night under the guise of going for a drive. They had driven her across the Pennsylvania border to a remote wooded area they had visited before. In the trunk, they had hidden kitchen knives and cleaning supplies. When Skylar's back was turned, bending down to grab a lighter, they began stabbing her. She screamed and fought, but they overpowered her. She was stabbed more than 50 times. Rachel showed police the location of the body, buried under a pile of branches in a forest clearing. DNA tests later confirmed it was Skylar. For the investigators, the motive was baffling. When asked why they did it, Rachel said simply, "We didn't like her anymore." No rage. No abuse. No revenge. Just casual cruelty wrapped in teen jealousy and emotional immaturity. The full horror of what Skylar experienced that night, betrayed, ambushed, and slaughtered by the people she trusted most, was something no one in Star City could ever reconcile. Her parents, devastated beyond words, had been holding on to the hope that their daughter was still alive somewhere. To learn that her two best friends had orchestrated and carried out the murder shattered everything they thought they knew about the people their daughter loved. And so began the long, painful process of seeking justice for Skylar. But even justice, when it finally came, could never make sense of the senseless. Rachel Shoaf's confession didn't just blow the case wide open. It exposed the raw, chilling truth that no one in Star City was ready to face. For 6 months, the community had searched, hoped, and prayed for a miracle. But Rachel's breakdown revealed that the miracle had never been possible. From the moment Skylar climbed into that car, her fate had already been sealed. Her two best friends had planned every detail of her death. Rachel's confession came in waves, halting and broken at first, but eventually clear enough to horrify even the most seasoned detectives. She told them about the knives hidden in the trunk, the bleach and towels they brought with them, and the way they had chosen the wooded location along the Pennsylvania border weeks in advance. It wasn't a spontaneous outburst. It wasn't a heated argument that spiraled out of control. It was cold, calculated, and emotionless. They had plotted to kill Skylar the way someone might plan a prank, meticulously with rehearsals, roles, and a backup plan in case things didn't go smoothly. The timeline, once shrouded in confusion, became devastatingly clear. The night Skylar disappeared, July 6, 2012, the girls waited for her in Sheila's car. It was a familiar routine, sneaking out, late-night drives, music playing through the speakers. Skylar didn't hesitate to join them. She didn't sense danger. As they drove out of town, toward the isolated woods in Greene County, Pennsylvania, the conversation was light, even cheerful. They laughed. They talked about the usual teenage nonsense. Nothing in their behavior gave her reason to be afraid. When they arrived, Skylar stepped out of the car with them. According to Rachel, they told her they were going to smoke. As she turned her back to search for a lighter in her bag, they counted to 3, just as they'd rehearsed. Then they attacked. Skylar tried to run, screaming and begging for help, but they had already surrounded her. She fought with everything she had, clawing and kicking, but she was overpowered. The two girls stabbed her more than 50 times. Rachel recalled that Skylar's last words were pleas for them to stop, cries for her parents, and then, silence. When it was done, they just stood there. Their clothes soaked in blood, hands trembling, they looked at each other and realized what they had done. And then, like nothing had happened, they began the cleanup. They dragged her body across the ground and concealed it under tree branches and brush. They tried to wipe the blood from their arms with paper towels. They poured bleach on the scene to cover their tracks. It was methodical, almost mechanical. Then they drove home. What followed was perhaps the most disturbing element of all. They went back to their lives. Sheila tweeted as if nothing had happened. She posted selfies, smiled in class, and even offered condolences to Skylar's parents. Rachel wasn't as composed. The emotional toll began to eat away at her. She had nightmares, panic attacks. She withdrew from her friends. By December, her mental state had deteriorated so badly that she was admitted to a psychiatric facility. It was during that stay, when the guilt became unbearable, that she finally told the truth. Police acted fast. With Rachel's confession and the exact coordinates of the body, they were able to recover Skylar's remains in January 2013. Although weather and wildlife had affected the scene, dental records confirmed it was her. Investigators now had the missing piece of the puzzle. They monitored Sheila closely, hoping she would confess. But she didn't. She kept up the charade. Even as her world collapsed around her, she showed no emotion. In January 2014, nearly a full year after Rachel's confession, Eddy finally pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. There were no tears. No apology. Just a flat statement and a courtroom stunned by the sheer lack of remorse. For the prosecution, building a timeline of events showed the depth of betrayal. They presented social media exchanges between the girls, text messages where they coordinated their alibis, and even chilling tweets posted days after the murder. One stood out: "We really did go on 3. It made the courtroom go cold." That single line, so casual and cryptic, was a reference to the prearranged moment they launched the attack. The motive remained as shocking as the crime itself. When asked why they did it, Rachel's answer was devoid of reason. "We just didn't like her anymore. That was it. Not revenge. Not fear. Not anger. Just dislike." A moment of teenage cruelty, stretched into a meticulously planned murder. Psychologists, prosecutors, and the media struggled to understand what would drive two teenage girls, raised in stable homes, loved by their families, surrounded by friends, to commit such a brutal act against someone who had once been a sister to them. Some blamed peer pressure. Others suggested jealousy. But no one had a satisfying explanation. It was the senselessness that made it unbearable. By the time both girls were sentenced, Rachel to 30 years with parole eligibility after 10, and Sheila to life with a chance of parole after 15, Skylar's parents were left with a hollow kind of justice. Their daughter was gone, and the girls who took her life would one day walk free again. There was no comfort in the courtroom, only finality. And the image that haunted everyone most wasn't the violence or the trial. It was the beginning, Skylar's last innocent moment, climbing into a car with the people she trusted most, with no idea she was walking straight into her own execution. The discovery of Skylar Neese's body in a remote Pennsylvania forest brought a wave of grief and horror that swept through the entire community of Star City, West Virginia. The news shattered any lingering hope her parents had clung to. For 6 agonizing months, they had believed she might still be alive, lost, hiding, or held against her will. But now, with Rachel Shoaf's confession and forensic confirmation, they were forced to confront a brutal truth. Their only child had been murdered in cold blood by the very girl she trusted the most. In the days following the revelation, a stunned silence fell over Skylar's high school. Teachers wept in staff meetings. Students whispered in hallways, eyes darting toward the empty desk that once belonged to a girl full of life and dreams. No one could make sense of it. Sheila, Eddy, one of the killers, had continued attending classes, smiling in selfies, joking with classmates, even tweeting publicly about missing Skylar, all while knowing exactly what had happened to her. The facade finally cracked when Sheila was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. In the courtroom, her demeanor was striking. She walked in without a hint of remorse, her expression cold and distant. There was no apology, no emotion, not even a glance toward Skylar's grieving parents as the charges were read. She stood still, hands cuffed, her teenage face betraying nothing of the monster behind it. Rachel, in contrast, appeared broken. She sobbed through much of the proceedings, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Her guilty plea had already been entered for second-degree murder, and she would face up to 30 years behind bars. She had shown authorities where to find Skylar's body, confessed in detail to the crime, and expressed deep regret, though for Skylar's parents, no words could ever make up for what she had done. The courtroom itself was a theater of heartbreak. Skylar's father, Dave Neese, sat stone-faced, arms crossed tightly over his chest, staring straight ahead as the prosecution laid out the facts. His wife, Mary, wept quietly beside him, clutching tissues in her hands. Family photos of Skylar flashed on a monitor. Baby pictures, birthday parties, prom night smiles. And then images of the crime scene. The forest clearing, the shallow grave, the blood-stained leaves. Gasps filled the room. One juror turned pale. It was almost too much to bear. Testimony revealed the full extent of the girl's manipulation. Text messages were shown, time-stamped hours before the murder, confirming that the plan had been set in motion. Search histories included chilling phrases like, "how to hide a body," and "what happens when you stab someone." The prosecution argued that Sheila was the ringleader, cool and calculated, while Rachel had followed out of fear, jealousy, or blind loyalty. Either way, both had acted together, both had struck with knives, and both had walked away leaving Skylar to bleed to death alone in the woods. As the verdicts came in, the judge delivered a firm, unflinching statement. To Sheila, Eddy, life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. To Rachel Shoaf, 30 years with parole eligibility after 10. Neither would see freedom anytime soon. But the sentences, while just in the eyes of the law, did little to soothe the anguish of a family who had lost everything. After the trial, Dave Neese stood before a sea of reporters, his voice steady but eyes hollow. "They didn't just kill our daughter," he said. "They destroyed our lives. And for what? Because they didn't like her anymore? Who does that?" His words echoed across the internet, striking a chord with parents and teens everywhere. Skylar's murder would leave a permanent mark, not just on her family but on the entire legal system in West Virginia. Her case prompted lawmakers to update the state's Amber Alert policies, which had previously not applied to missing teenagers believed to be runaways. Under Skylar's law, alerts would now be issued more broadly and swiftly, ensuring that cases like hers would never again be met with inaction during those crucial first hours. In the years that followed, true crime documentaries, books, and podcasts would explore the case from every angle. But for the Neese family there was no fascination, only endless loss. Birthdays passed in silence. Holidays were empty. And every time they saw photos of Sheila or Rachel, it wasn't their faces they saw, it was Skylar's, smiling, trusting, never suspecting the betrayal that awaited her. What made the case so haunting wasn't just the murder itself, it was the betrayal at its core. Skylar had known these girls her entire life. They had sleepovers, shared secrets, helped each other through breakups. There was no warning. No confrontation. Just a plan born from jealousy, nurtured by manipulation and carried out with brutal indifference. To this day people struggle to understand it. How could two teenage girls with no history of violence commit such a monstrous act? Was it sociopathy? Peer pressure? A toxic friendship gone unchecked? Or something deeper and darker inside them both? There were no simple answers. Only the lingering, painful knowledge that Skylar Neese was taken not by a stranger in the night, but by the people she loved and trusted most. And that, above all else, is what makes her story unforgettable.